Good evening, everyone. So we are starting the class number 19 of Advanced Course in Drones for Development. And today we are going to talk about agriculture in a very different sense. We have been talking about farm robotics, we talked about drones, and we spoke about remote sensing. So today we're going to talk about how do we use these applications along with machine learning and artificial intelligence, and maybe we are able to make some farm boundaries. Now, this is very relevant to almost every country because almost every country has these problems of the marginal farmers who don't really have a boundary which is defined. And that leads to a lot of social and economical problems in that, and especially the divide which they have, and the lack of access to various schemes and insurances and a lot of other things. So in this class, we will be speaking to Leka. Now, Leka is my friend from Tanzania. He's a managing director of Tanzania Flying Labs. And Tanzania Flying Labs is one of the oldest, largest, wisest, and one of the best flying labs across the flying labs network. And I have learned a lot from them, and we all learn a lot from them. They have amazing case studies. They have done amazing work in almost every sector. They haven't left any stone unturned so far. And there is a lot we can learn from Leka because he's a very wise man and very learned. I mean, as a teacher, he's very good, and as a speaker, he's amazing, and he's a very good leader. So we should make the most of his presence out here. Thank you so much, Leka, for joining a class today, for accepting my invitation, and this class will be forever grateful to you for all the wisdom that you bring from the land of Africa. Now, Africa as a continent, it's beautiful, it's amazing, and you guys have been doing an amazing job there. So thank you very much. The class is yours now, Leka.
Wow, what an introduction, Ruchi. I hope I live up to it. Hello, everybody. My name is Leka Tingitana. As Dr. Ruchi mentioned already, I am from Tanzania. I run the Tanzania Flying Labs. As you're maybe already aware, we are one of a number of global flying labs within a network that stretches from Peru all the way to the South Pacific. And as Dr. Ruchi mentioned, I mean, right now the network has more than 20 flying labs, but at the beginning there, we were one of the first. And this was something that was born out of the lack of local expertise, local experts, especially in the humanitarian side of things, in terms of being able to acquire data using drones and using them in either disaster mitigation scenarios or disaster response scenarios. So we, as the Tanzania Flying Labs, we've been involved in a number of projects. Some of them are still ongoing. Some of them are in disaster management. We are part of the disaster response team here in the city of Dar es Salaam, which is the commercial capital of this country. We are involved in health robotics. Primarily, we're using drones, for example, to identify water catchment areas for mosquito vector control, primarily in the islands of Zanzibar. We are also using drones, specifically sprayer drones, to spray biological control agents in these areas which have been identified, these water catchment areas which have been identified using drones, using drone data. And hopefully soon we're also going to explore how we could use cargo drones to deliver essential medicines and collect test samples. So that's in the pipeline. We work in what we call eco-robotics. This involves agriculture. This also involves nature conservation and the like. We've done a number of projects around that. some very interesting ones in marine protected areas and also in um, uh, land conservation. And this is part of what I will talk about today. And finally, we're also involved in development robotics. Primarily, we run business incubators where we essentially create, we incubate youth who want to provide drones as a service. So we teach them how to develop business plans, and we teach them how to fly drones. And more importantly, we teach them how to process and analyze drone data. So, Africa. So just to give you a context as pertaining to what we're about to talk about today, only 3% of this continent has been professionally surveyed. 3%. If you, just to give you another example, if you look at Tanzania, as I said, I'm from Dar es Salaam, the commercial capital. Now, this is like equivalent to your Mumbai in India. We have a population here of 6 million people. And out of that population, only 18%, only 18% of Dar es Salaam has been professionally surveyed. So essentially you have a population out there that's essentially living in, undeclared land, to put it softly. They're people who exist, they're in the majority, and they're consuming resources, yet they're not counted, and their land rights are not recognized because they have not been, nobody has surveyed their land. They do not have title deeds. And the same goes, farming being the biggest employer. You're looking at more than 70% of the country involved in some kind of agricultural activity. So what this obviously creates, as Dr. Ruchi already alluded to, is land conflicts, and more importantly, it creates a kind of uncertainty on land tenureship. And when you have this uncertainty, it hampers development for very obvious reasons. So there have been plenty of initiatives essentially to survey and essentially hand out these title deeds to the owners, but it has been a very slow process because it is a very big country and the task at hand is enormous. So what we set out to do is to really see if drone data can support the process of land registration, specifically farming land. So when it comes to farming land, in Tanzania, there's what's called a CCRO. This is a certificate, a customary certificate of right of occupancy. It's essentially like a traditional title deed that you can give to a farmer, and it doesn't require, let's say, the very stringent, very super accurate measurements that you would use, let's say, in an urban environment. So, Ruchi, can everybody see my screen here?
Yes, Leka, we can.
Great. So just to add on to that context, what we did is we were asked by a region up in northern Tanzania. It's called Simiyu region. It is actually a brand new region, relatively speaking, to basically test this hypothesis that drone data can be used to support the CCRO process, which is now being done, like I said, very slowly, and I would say very inefficiently. Okay, so what we did then is we set out to a district called Meatu district. Meatu district is actually quite a prosperous district within the country. These are some of the biggest cotton producers in the country, and they're also the biggest herders as well. So the question then was, if you look at it from the land conflict prevention perspective, a lot of these herders would essentially venture out of their region, essentially invade other regions, and by taking their cattle to these other regions to graze, and therefore creating conflicts with farmers, with agriculturalists. Now, it turned out that these herders are not really like traditional, like by definition herders. Back in their region, Simiyu, they're actually really big landowners. So you find out that someone is still essentially undertaking pastoralism by taking their cows out of the region, even though they own like 400 hectares of land back in their home region. So there was this initiative to see if these herders / farmers actually could be encouraged to stay put, stay at home, and dedicate half of their land to grazing, essentially producing a kind of a fodder type of crop like Napier grass, and the other half of their farm to the commercial, crop like cotton, as I mentioned before. So we then did a pilot just to see again what was possible and what wasn't. We were then able to survey 3 villages totaling 12,000 hectares in 5 days using fixed wing drones. Okay, so we used 2 fixed wing drones, specifically the SenseFly EB Plus, to survey 3 villages in 5 days. And so what you're seeing here are the data products that came out of that data acquisition exercise. Part of the data products is like what you're seeing here on your screen, this digital elevation model of one of the villages called Ngoboko, where in this case, the redder areas indicate higher elevation, whereas the green areas or the lighter areas, the like orange, light green areas are the lower elevation. So these are very important when you're trying to essentially do a land use plan and plan like irrigation channels and the like, as you could imagine. And what we also did, which was very, very important, was what we call a participatory mapping exercise. And we did this essentially to do a comparison. You know, when I keep saying that could drone data support the CCRO process, what the CCR process involves is usually there would be somebody physically walking the boundaries of these farms with a GPS. Yeah, so it's very painstaking work. It can sometimes be very dangerous work because you don't know what you're stepping on. These farms as you can see already here on this side map, which I'll show you in a much clearer way in a moment using a web map, they're not like these perfect rectangles. Some of them are almost like amoeba-like, they don't have any rhyme or reason to them. But the people, the local community know exactly whose farm is whose. And the reason why you want to do this participatory mapping exercise, as you see here on the left, where you sit with the local community, with the local elders and so on, is to get that positive confirmation. And then what we did is we actually then walked the farms, and hopefully I can show that to you here. Oh, great, that's working, perfect. See if I can zoom into that. Great. Let's go down. Is everybody able to see this, Ruchi?
Yes, we can see that.
Great. Okay, so what you see here depicted in red is essentially the drone data. And what that means is after we collected the data, right? After we did the data acquisition exercise using the drones, there was a 3 to 4 month gap where we came back to Dar es Salaam, we processed the data, analyzed it, and created a number of these data products, one of which you're seeing here, which is the actual orthomosaic. It's a geo-rectified orthomosaic of this village. And then what we did, which you can slightly see here on the left-hand side, is we printed these huge poster maps. And then we went back to the community with these maps, these physical maps, where we then asked the local community to trace their farms. So what you're seeing in red is the actual trace of these farms. And then what we did is then we actually walked to those farms to see if there was essentially alignment, that there would be correlation between what was traced and what we walked with the owner of the farm. And you can see here that there's almost perfect alignment with a very few exceptions, for example, on this side, which was mainly caused by this main road that was cutting across the village. So the preliminary, let's say, results indicated to us that absolutely drone data could support this process. And, although it was a small sample size, 9 out of 10 of these villages were, 9 out of 10 of these farms were able to, I would say there was full correlation between the drone data and what we walked, what was essentially ground truth. So this was very encouraging information because really then in terms of scaling up, what you'd want to do is use a combination of drone data and satellite data to essentially do whole districts. Flying the drones, like I said, 2 drones, 12,000 hectares, 5 days working from morning till evening has its limitations, maybe as Dr. Ruchi has already told you guys already before. So you kind of, if you want to really scale things up, even on a district basis, before we even talk like on a regional or state basis, you want to do a combination of both. The bottom line is this kind of high resolution spatial data can support this kind of process. And again, I want to stress the participatory nature of this exercise and the community engagement side of these things, here you see me essentially giving a demo. This is the regional commissioner. In other countries, that would be the governor of the state. You have to do these things. You have to get that buy-in. And then usually once you've done that, you get more or less full cooperation from the community. It is a participatory exercise. And, what you want to do is also eventually give or build the capacity of the district officials to at least be able to interpret drone data as well. They don't necessarily need to have an account like I do here or like we do with Esri. So we can help them create these products. And what we do then is we send them the link and they're able to see from their side, because actually there's very good internet there, very good internet connectivity. And they can do some of these exercises for themselves. So I will share this project with you, the essential overview of this in a minute. And I've also given a copy to Dr. Ruchi. This is an ongoing project. What we did, so phase 1 was the drone data acquisition. Phase 2 was essentially this participatory mapping exercise. And then phase 3, as you can see here, it's going to be, not was because it hasn't happened yet, is the development of these land use plans for agriculture and the registration of essentially these CCROs for the local community, which would require a mobilization of students, GIS inclined youth to essentially assist with that exercise. And again, us training drone pilots to go out there, acquire this drone data, but then also combining it with satellite data as well to get a comprehensive overview of what's on the ground and eventually come up with a registry of who owns what. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leka. I have a couple of quick questions for you. Did we try using OpenStreetMap or Pictera, or Pictera with satellite images or Pictera with drone images to do an automatic analysis, something like that? Can we do that?
You mean as a base map?
Not a base map, to do the marking the land boundaries. For example, if everybody comes on OpenStreetMaps and they do a participatory approach there, something like that can be done with these maps or no?
Well, absolutely, because this data is georeferenced. So whether you're using OpenStreetMap, because I can use OpenStreetMap here as well, Ruchi. Yeah, so everything is georeferenced. So you can use OpenStreetMaps and use Quantum GIS, for example, to do the polygonization, and essentially do the boundary tracing in that manner. It's absolutely possible, and we do that sometimes.
Okay, but then I think, for example, some of the rectangles that you have traced here, they're not rectangles but polygons. Some of the polygons have rectangles inside them. Is it that the entire land belongs to a particular person and there are various crops growing there?
Absolutely, that's an excellent observation, and we can actually zoom in here to exactly what you're talking about, right? So you do see this, for example, let me pick an easy one. For example, this piece of land right here, it has kind of like these 3 rectangles inside, right? So in this particular case, this farmer is, okay, so this whole area, they're growing cotton. So some of them will do like a mix. So they'll have maybe grow corn. Some will grow a combination of corn and the cotton. And increasingly, what you will also have is they'll grow a combination of cotton and sunflower, because there's evidence there to show that if you put the sunflowers with the cotton, the pests are more likely to attack the sunflower and leave the cotton alone. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. But this is someone's land, this whole entire piece here.
Okay, so I think if I use an AI tool out here, I will only get the boundaries of what is defined. Probably, if let's say if I use a crowdsourcing in this, and if we are not from the place at all, and we are all over the world, and it just asks us to use this and just keep marking rectangles or boundaries, we would do a good job, but then that doesn't mean ownership of the land.
Quite honestly, Ruchi, the AI is not going to help you that much here, because these are not boundaries, right? These are not farm boundaries. These are crop boundaries, if you will.
Right,
These are
right,
crop boundaries in someone's farm.
right.
So there are no visual markers. There are a few exceptions um, from this particular area. You will see, take for example, this particular household over here. Yeah.
Right.
Every once in a while, you might get fortunate and see that someone has actually um, essentially demarcated their land using a visible marker, such as this hedge, or these could also be trees around their piece of land. And by the way, this is probably not even a farm. This is probably someone's household where they also have their cattle. You see these kind of circular areas, they're called bomas. And
Okay.
these are essentially where they keep the cattle so that they don't escape. So an individual such as this particular household over here is probably, he looks very organized. He's probably a bit wealthier than the others. So he has this nice kind of boundary around his property. But what you will find out is he's also most likely the owner of this farm. And on top of that, you'll also, what we encountered there very quickly is you'll find that someone like this owns this farm, but then owns like these other farms as well. And then like another farm up here. So that's the way it goes.
That's
So AI,
these AI won't help. Definitely, you need on the ground
yeah,
survey, as you said. You need to slog. You need to work with the community and the government and do the long run. I mean, there are no shortcuts here. It has to be a
there's
tedious
no
process.
shortcuts, Ruchi. It's a very participatory, very drawn out exercise that has to be done very methodically, with consensus
Okay.
among all the parties involved.
So, did you have a challenge wherein people did not give you a consent to fly over their farms?
That's an excellent question. We did not. So in this particular area, I would say was an exception. I would say it was an exception because you see, I would say that the way this project was approached was the right way. Like it was almost perfect. Now there is a cost associated with that because that meant that we needed to do multiple trips, right? These are flights, this is like you flying from maybe, I don't know, Mumbai to Calcutta or someplace like that, or to New Delhi. There's a cost involved, but it was done the right way. And part of it is the main man, right? the regional commissioner said, this needs to happen. You know, I want to bring development to my region. I want us to be the biggest milk producers in the country. I want to set up milk producing facilities, and I want us to not to only produce our own milk, but we want to box it up and we want to sell it like a completely professional process. So, you know, we're really talking about industrialization. So the political will was there, everything was in place. If the regional commissioner says it should be done, that means all the district officials have to toe the line. And if the district officials are toeing the line, that goes down to the wards, and that goes all the way down to the villages. Yeah.
So
So
then
you already had this. Go ahead.
are the villagers just supposed to accept the decision being taken for them, or they still have a say in this?
That's a great question. This was not an order, right? This was more of a blessing.
Okay.
So you still have to go there and show them, and that's what this exercise was about, was to show them what the benefits, in this case of drone data, could be. So that buy-in was still there. Now it just, you know, we surveyed 3 out of more than 100 villages in this district.
Okay.
So it could very well be that maybe in the other districts we could maybe experience some kind of resistance. But it just so happens that these particular districts and these particular villages rolled out the red carpet for us. Yeah, they were more than cooperative, and it made for a very, very pleasant experience, I have to say. Because I can give you a more recent example. Right now, I just completed an archaeological survey in a region called Arusha, right? In a kind of historical site. And the local community there was very resistant to drones, and to some extent even slightly hostile. So it is a world of difference sometimes, depending on where you go when you want to do these things. And even though you're following the same procedures and you're getting all, you know, your buy-in from above and all of that, the local community still says, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want you to do this. So it just depends on their circumstances. In this particular example that I gave in Arusha, this community actually was encroaching on a conservation site. Mm-hmm. Whereas this particular village in Simiu, in the Meatu district, they were very, very keen on getting their land registered, specifically their farms, I should say.
So have there been cases of corruption, land grabbing, or domination, or something like that, which we are trying to avoid by doing these surveys?
I would say generally in Tanzania, we have been very fortunate that we don't really experience significant land conflicts over here. It is land, people's tenureship in general is respected. The government respects it, and most people respect, you know, you say this is your land, it's recognized by the community, nobody encroaches on your land in general. Great. It's only really when, you know, I take my cows to Ruchi's farm is where you start experiencing conflicts. But nowhere to a scale where I could say it's like a major problem in Tanzania.
And did the government have concerns about data privacy, data security, sharing, not sharing, keeping it locked in or open sharing, or what were their attitudes towards the data itself?
Well, by definition, the whole point of the exercise actually is full transparency, right?
Okay.
Is to be completely open. So what these maps, yeah, these maps, like I said, were printed and they were literally posted not only on the walls of the land, let's say, department at the local district council, but also at the ward level, right? That, hey, here's the map. And eventually what you want to happen is using creative data visualization techniques, you want to give them that capability where they can click on a land parcel, or if that land parcel has some kind of identification number, however you want to do it, the information of the owner should appear, the size of the farm, which is super important information, which again, drone data is really good at, is there, and you can take it as far as you want, the type of crops that this person is growing over there. And as you can imagine, Ruchi, we could even start thinking about the multispectral data, where we can start even doing soil analysis, and also create these vegetation indices where we can gauge even the health of some of these crops.
Is that the vision of the government? Are they planning to do that in the future?
They're not there yet.
Okay.
They're not there yet because
2 years, 3 years down the line.
It's a gradual process, because even as I mentioned already with this particular project, it's incomplete. We haven't even completed it yet. Phase 3 is still missing here.
And in your long-term scale-up plan, are you planning to do capacity building at the district level or the village level so that the youth from the village can do this kind of mapping themselves or contribute in some way or the other to what you do?
That has always been the plan from day one. But as much capacity building as you would want to do, with the best intentions, at some point, there has to be the pull. You see what I mean, Ruchi? There has to be the pull. In other words, you reach a certain point, like where we have reached now, where you're hoping that people already start to see the value, right? And generally, the local community saw the value, but you also want the district to see the value, especially the key people in the district, like the executive director. The district executive director needs to see the value so that they can fund these kind of initiatives and say, yes, I want these kind of capabilities internally.
Right. Any other resistance or challenge that you faced during this project before this, or you're still facing?
It is, I would not say there was necessarily a resistance, but I can absolutely testify to there was a expectation management problem. And what I mean by that is the expectation, even to what I would consider our best efforts in trying to explain what the technology can and cannot do. The expectation was kind of like what you are already alluding at, that we would survey the entire village, and then there would be an automatic demarcation of these farm boundaries. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you're thinking that this drone is some kind of wizard-like device. Once it flies over your village, it knows this is Leka's farm, this is Ruchi's farm, you know, and so on and so on. And it's gonna perfectly create these polygons because it just knows that that is so-and-so's farm, which is completely not the case. And due to that misunderstanding, there was a kind of a, you know, it led to a miscommunication, which of course we tried to salvage through this participatory mapping exercise by actually then showing them that, no, we're still gonna have to sit with the local community, literally go to the farm, hand over the map to the owner or owners and say, here's a pencil, can you trace out your farm? That's how it's done.
Got it. And what is the team size that you deployed to do this entire thing? How many people were needed to do it?
To doing what exactly?
To do the whole thing, for example, mapping, what was the team that was doing the mapping and then the talking to the community and then marking everything? So number of people that were involved in it.
Okay, so I would say on the community engagement side, including the regional governor, the regional commissioner, we worked hand in hand with the premier think tank in Tanzania called ESRF, the Economic and Social Research Foundation. The ESRF was originally tasked with the job of coming up with an investment plan for the entire region. So they were already fully engaged with not only the regional authorities, but the district authorities as well. So that kind of then paved the way for this project. On the data acquisition side, we're talking about a team of 4, right? So you essentially have 2 drone pilots and 2 assistants for the job. For the participatory mapping exercise, in this particular sample size was, we did 10. We did 10 farms. So this was only done by 2 people, myself and our drone data analyst. So yeah, that's what it took so far. For phase 3 is when you would need a much bigger team of then essentially these GIS, you know, these students to go around now to every farm in the village and do this exercise, do the tracing exercise. So you would need, you know, if I remember correctly, we reckoned we would need, I don't know, short of maybe about 20 people to handle this particular job, this particular village, which was 37 square kilometers in area.
So I would read out some of the questions which our classmates have asked. So somebody is saying, Mariam from Georgia, she says, Leka, you mentioned that you provide consultancy services on business modeling of drone startups. Are these consultancy services available, accessible online, or any publication which is available for that?
Okay, it's a great question, Mariam. Most of our courses, including and like the incubation program, has been face to face, and quite honestly, it's really only this COVID-19 pandemic that's made us think about creating online content. And this is something that we are going to be working on, and we are already working on at the moment. The thing about the incubation program is it is about a business plan development, but then because it is about eventually you as a business or you as an individual providing drones as a service, we also teach you how to fly drones. We also teach you how to process drone data. And of course, most importantly, we train you how to analyze the drone data. So it's pending.
Right. Thanks. So Mayank is asking, what are SODA sensors? SODA.
Uh, the SODA, it's an RGB sensor. It's a fancy acronym by the SenseFly company. It stands for something like sensor optimized for drone applications or something like that. You know, it's an RGB sensor.
Okay. Julie from Kenya
We
is
love calling
asking
it the
us.
SODA.
Julie from Kenya is asking, I'm curious about the distribution of land ownership between men and women in the area. Did you get an indication of this, or was the area too small to get adequate statistical data?
That's a great question, and that would have been some of the results coming out of phase 3, which we have not done yet. But generally speaking, in this particular region of the country, it's a very paternal region. It's a very paternal part of Tanzania. You could probably guarantee that most of that land, in terms of ownership, is owned by men and is administered by men. So, yeah, once we do phase 3, we can get the exact stats on that.
Okay. So
But it will
Radhika
be
has.
overwhelmingly for sure.
Great. I'm also hoping for the same. So Radhika wants to ask about georeferencing. So she was trying to work with Google Earth and Pictera, and the message was that this is non-georeference. How to do georeferencing of an image?
Okay, now you got to remember something. The drone, plus the soda already georeference the imagery. Right? So when we process that data, it's already georeferenced by the drone and the drone software.
I can add to that, Radhika. For example, if you're not using a drone and if you're using your mobile phone to take the image, in your mobile phone settings, you can always click the location settings. So when in your camera settings, you can put on the location setting. It will always provide your GPS tag to your every picture that you take. Similarly, in drones, every picture which is taken has a geo tag to it. It automatically happens. Okay, so Rohit is asking, for the purpose of participatory mapping in the form of visual interpretation, was Google Earth also explored? Apart from developing the DEN, what are the future plans of analyzing or interpreting the drone data as part of the project?
So Google Earth, again, this is about visualization, right? So in terms of, I mean, you see us here again, this image tells a lot, like this really tells how it's like. You have all these people and you want them to trace their farm. It is worth mentioning that it was quite remarkable how accurately the local community was able to trace their farms using this poster. That cannot be ignored. It was just a remarkable finding that they were pinpoint accuracy. They're like, hey, this is my farm. In what is actually relatively, you can see it's kind of like a semi-arid area. It's very difficult to see the farm boundaries, but they're like, this is my farm, and they traced it almost perfectly using the drone data. This would not be that easy to do using Google Earth. Do you see what I mean? It does, of course, add like a layer of, you could maybe say, complexity or extra work, because what we would need to do then is actually take what they've traced and transcribe that back to the geospatial software. Yeah. So I get your point, but in this case, it would have been impractical to use Google Earth or something similar.
Okay. So, Leka, there is a question about after the owners trace out the farms, how is this incorporated back into a regulated system?
Right. So once, you know, what you would want to see happen is once the owner has traced his or her farm, there would be a verification process. And then based on those results, and the verification is really the consensus amongst the community, by the way, then based on that, you would then go through that CCRO process. Like you would be able to accelerate that because this would be recognized by the local district authorities or the local government authorities and say, okay, this is valid. Here is then your title deed. Like I said, here is then your traditional title deed, which is recognized by the government. Of course, they'll have to fill out the forms, you know, name and all that, household information, but generally that's what would happen.
Okay. Mayank again is asking, is it possible to use digitized government landholding information or GIS data as a starting point for the mapping exercise?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's how we started. These villages, these particular villages, they all had beacons, right? So that initially helped us essentially already demarcate the boundaries of the villages, so that then our drones would essentially fly within this particular area. So, in fact, in a way that would even answer the follow-up question, because it gives you an idea that that is as far as the digitized these rasters of these villages.
Okay,
Does that answer the question?
I guess. So next is, do you license the drone pilots after training?
I should have mentioned that. So we are one of only two flying labs in the entire continent of Africa, and I would even extend that to the Middle East as well. That can essentially certify drone pilots. So we certainly do that. For the program is intended for actually experienced pilots, and you are certified on your drone. So it is a certificate of competence on your drone, and it is a United Kingdom Civil Aviation Authority certificate. So it's recognized in the UK. It is issued by the UK. It is then recognized in the entire continent of Europe and in a lot of countries around the world as well, because the UK certification is most probably one of the highest standards, certification standards in the world. So you can use this in Australia, South Africa, and I wouldn't be surprised if you could use it in India as well, as in the local civil aviation authority in India probably recognizes the UK certification as well.
I think that won't be here in India as yet because we are still figuring out our own regulations. All right. So Anil is asking, can you explain the role of digital elevation contour mapping in your project?
Right. So as I mentioned before, the reason why it's actually the lands office within the district that not only asks you for the raster, but the elevation models are of real importance to them, because in terms of the land use planning, as I mentioned before, you're essentially developing a land use plan for agriculture. So the way that you would go about that, where are you going to put the irrigation canals to take advantage of gravity, for example? Where are you likely to find water? Where are you most likely to dig a water well, for example? Um, how do you plan drainage? Yeah, all these things require elevation models. Yeah, so that's what you would want that for. That's what you would want that for, and in particular, a digital terrain model would be of quite high value in this particular scenario. Yeah. So that's what they use them for.
Okay. And Leka,
It's
this
also
kind of,
good for the
sorry, please go on. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, it's also great to feed this information to the drone sometimes, because it gives you more accurate idea of how the elevation looks like, so that when you do another mapping exercise, where maybe you would want to then use some kind of AI tools, maybe to do change detection, the drone is able to fly in a more accurate manner, because it has a more accurate information about the elevation. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so add-on question to that would be the expertise or the knowledge expertise of how these contours can be used for irrigation planning or some other planning can be done. I mean, is it done with the flying labs, or is it they have their own expert available who use this data that you provide?
So this would be the district officials, because they are the ones who need to come up with the land use plan.
Okay.
And of course, again, that would be their version of participatory mapping, because they would need to involve the local community as well and say, okay, this is the area now based on the drone data, or I should say, not exclusively drone, but based on this high resolution spatial data, we can now, this is what we think, this is where we should put our farms. So ideally, you would have kind of like one main dedicated farming area, or a series of blocks based on particular criteria of the particular crop that you want to grow.
Got it.
So that would be the district council.
Okay. So Ramesh is asking, which applications do you use for mapping in these fields?
For mapping?
Yeah. I guess he's trying to ask about Pix4D or Drone Deploy, or what is it that you used for mapping?
Okay, so we are Pix4D people. It doesn't mean that that's our religion, but I would say that that's what we were born into, and that's what we primarily use. but a lot of us also use quantum GIS as well. But for processing, we use Pix4D. And for more of the on the analysis side, we use ArcGIS Pro, essentially Esri products.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Amit wants to ask, sometimes it happens so that people occupy lands for years that are not theirs and they claim the lands to be theirs. Did you face similar kind of issue?
Right. So again, this particular community, this particular village, I would say this particular district is an exception because they are very cooperative and they really get along amongst each other. So there is no encroachment into each other's land. They all have a very amicable agreement of who owns what and whose land is whose. So even when we were doing the participatory mapping exercise, the owner of a particular plot didn't necessarily need to even be there. It was actually the other villagers, including the village elders, that were saying like, hey, we perfectly know what Leka's land looks like, and let us walk you around it. You see, so it was just really this amazing experience where they are already ahead of the curve. Yeah. There's really internally amongst them, there were no land conflicts whatsoever. And everybody knows whose land is whose.
The concept of Ubuntu in Africa is what it is all about. The love that people have for their community, and I belong to my
Amen.
community. I am because my community is.
There you go. I couldn't have said it better.
I'm a fan of that concept. Okay, so Ramesh is asking, for mapping compared to multi-rotor or fixed wing, which do you find better? And within 5 days, how much time it took you to swap the batteries and charge the batteries? And were you faced with issues for charging these batteries when you were in the field?
Ruchi, I missed that whole entire last part. Can you start over, please?
All right. He's asking about the batteries when you are in the field, the battery swapping and charging. Was it a challenge for you? How much time did it take and how difficult was it?
Okay, so starting with the battery question, is really not, there's no difficulty to it because, these were areas that were already pre-scouted. And to that previous point, we knew exactly what we were going to map. So we already planned for it before we even flew there, right? So you generally know, I would say with the EV Plus, that at the very minimum, each flight is going to give us about 200 hectares, right? To say that properly, each EV Plus flight can cover approximately 200 hectares. And in some cases, that can go up to 300 actually. But let's just say 200 to be on the safe side. That's about a 40 to 45-minute flight. So, if I know that I'm going to map 1,000 hectares today, I'm going to, let's say it's an ideal day, and meaning that I'm not going to get any inclement weather. So to me, I'm already thinking that, that's probably going to be about 5 flights. So I'll probably boost it up to 8, just to have that kind of, buffer. And I can usually on a typical day, I can do about 8 flights. So 8 flights, I can take 4 batteries, and essentially, while the EB is up, in the air acquiring data, the other battery is charging. So it's kind of like a conveyor belt.
Okay.
So 4 batteries is enough in that particular case.
And you have enough electricity excess in those villages to do that charging.
Right. So in this particular case, you don't need grid power to charge the EV batteries. If you look here at this picture, that is a Toyota Land Cruiser. So the chargers that we use, literally either I'm plugging in an inverter into the cigarette lighter and I'm charging the batteries that way, or I can clip the battery charger directly to the battery of the car and charge the batteries that way. So I have full flexibility, full freedom to charge the batteries the way I want.
Interesting. What about internet
Yeah.
connectivity? Do you need internet connectivity to process these images when you are in the field, or you did it back in, or was there a challenge with that? And even the computers that you use, is a normal PC enough, or you want to use high grade computers for that?
You want to use a high grade computer. And we do not process this imagery in the field. It would be impractical to do so. As a general rule of thumb, for each day that we spend collecting drone data is going to probably equal to approximately 3 days of processing. What that means is we're coming back, again, flying back to Dar es Salaam, flying back to the office with the data, setting up the high grade computer, which has got a powerful GPU, a powerful CPU, setting it up, start processing, you set up the job in Pix4D and you let it run and you leave because it's going to take you, if you don't get power interruptions, it's probably going to take you, let's say a village like this, around 2 to 3 days to process the data.
Hmm.
Using a powerful computer.
So you bring back these memory cards as is, or you transfer the data into a hard disk, external hard disk, or what do you do?
Right. So you wanna kind of be safe, right? You wanna have a just back up, right? So from the memory card that's embedded in the drone, you transfer that data over into an external hard drive. So then you have both. You have the data in the external hard drive, and you also have the data as a backup in the memory card if you have enough capacity, right? So then take that data back with you. That's how we transport it.
That should be like a huge amount of data for you, right?
Again, it depends on the size, Ruchi, and it also depends on the nature of the data, right? In this case, this is RGB data. In this particular, so I can say, all right, for data,
Okay.
right? So a job like this, then maybe multiply that by a factor of 5. Yeah, you could easily get like 30 to 40 gigabytes
Interesting.
of you could generate 40 gigabytes of data from just one village alone.
Okay. And what kind of fail safes were used for BVLS operation?
Hello, Ruchi.
Am I audible? Sorry. Yeah. So the question is about beyond visual line of sight flights. Did you do them, or were they all within the visual line of sight? And if they were beyond visual line of sight, were there any kind of fail-safe measures that were used?
Another great question. The only way you're doing this job is beyond visual line, flying beyond the visual line of sight. So you're essentially talking about positioning yourself in a as central position as you can within the village, if it's conducive to a takeoff and landing, kind of like an airstrip that you'd want to designate for the job. So either in each direction, you could be flying more than 7-10 kilometers.
Okay.
Okay. Which is totally beyond the visual line of sight. And in some cases, you are flying beyond the radial link. So you are flying not only beyond the visual line of sight, but you are flying beyond telemetry data.
Okay.
That needs to be calculated. And I'm not saying that that's the way to do things. But in terms of
Sorry.
in terms of your fail-safes, it's a judgment call. You as the pilot are making a judgment on a whole slew of things. You're looking at your battery power. I would even venture to say you're looking at the kind of equipment you're using as well. I do not own shares in SenseFly, but I can absolutely testify to the reliability of the platform. I trust it. After flying numerous times using this particular platform, I more or less know how it behaves if I follow all the SOPs, the standard operating procedures. Very reliable. So when I'm flying 7 kilometers out, in fact, here in Ngoboko village, as you can see, the population density is very low. So I'm actually more comfortable, let's say, flying here than flying in a densely populated urban environment, which I'm sometimes forced to do here in Dar es Salaam. And the only reason, or the only thing that gives me confidence to do that, is that I trust the equipment. So about having trust in the equipment, knowing how the equipment behaves, and following the standard operating procedures, it's also, part of SOPs is also using what are called like observers. So I don't necessarily, even though I'm standing at, I'm positioned at the ground station, I can have spotters located strategically 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometers away from me. And they can give me a report on how the drone is performing. So you have to make this judgment call. You've got the spotters, you've got the trust in the equipment, you're respecting the SOPs, then you're able to really cover these large areas.
Do you needed the ground control points for this?
Great question. I should have mentioned that before. So when it comes to the CCRO, that's why the CCRO is different from, let's say, the title deed, where you literally would put beacons on the farm and essentially declare that, yep, this is Leka's farm and here are the beacons, which would be professionally surveyed to centimeter accuracy. For the CCRO, the conditions are not that stringent. you can have essentially be plus minus 3 meters in terms of your accuracy, which is great because that is just about the capabilities of the GPS, the internal GPS of the drone. Do you see what I mean, Ruchi?
Yeah.
So we did not need to use ground control points for this particular job. And what I can add on to that is we have recently acquired a really awesome base station. So if we essentially have a known point, if we position our base station over that known point and use and fly our EB as a rover, which has the RTK, we can very accurately, 2-centimeter accuracy, acquire this data, survey these farms without the ground control points, and get centimeter accuracy if we wanted to. So if I did this all over again, I could just, as long as there's a known point, so maybe I go there with a professional surveyor on day one, they designate a known point for me. Maybe there was like a local school where there was a point there, or it could be, like I said, those beacons that were placed there by professional government surveyors. So what that professional surveyor would do is essentially transfer that point to where I am located, where the pilot is located. And that's where I would set up my base station. And then I would proceed to acquire data in that manner. Of course, I said RTK, that is only if I have if there's a continuous, non-interrupted radio link between the base station and the drone, which is acting as a rover. In this particular village, I'm most likely to use the PPK. We have trialed this actually in this project I was telling you about in Arusha, and the results have been amazing. They have been amazing. There is pinpoint accuracy between what we surveyed on the ground with the professional and what the drone and the base station were able to do. Essentially, the corrected imagery. The corrected imagery that was corrected by the base station, which was collected by the drone.
Interesting. Thanks. So, Mayank, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, thanks, Dr. Ruchi, and hi, Leka. Thanks a lot for the amazing information. There were two things which stood out to me in the orthomosaic that you have over here. If I understood it correctly, yellow is what are the regions which were based on traditional surveying, whereas red was the drone-based orthomosaic, which had people trace out in pencil. Correct?
That is correct. The red is what was traced out in pencil, and the yellow was the ground truthing.
Yeah, correct. So if you zoom into the orthomosaic, this just north of that. So as you explained, there was one anomaly here, which was about this yellow line versus the red line.
Right here?
Correct. So
visual traced down on the physical map.
Okay.
Right? And the yellow is what we physically walked with him.
Okay.
So he made an error. That's what what that means, right? Like where he thought, hey, no, this is mine. Well, actually, no, it's not. So this this is showing that these things can happen.
Sure.
And in a way, I'm kind of glad it did, because then it would have kind of shown that almost this perfection, which is really not the case. What this shows us is there are going to be errors.
Sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And also this one plot of lands northwest of this one. I think it was just if you could pan slightly northwest.
Okay, so
Yeah,
here.
exactly. This one, this red line that's coming inside. So I get how the boundary was messed up. Exactly, like right next to this red line coming inside. Yeah, exactly that. So I could see how the boundary was a bit confusing, or like was wrongly drawn for the other plot that you explained right now. How did this happen? Like this red thing coming inside.
Right. So in this particular case, I don't quite remember, but what you do have in this particular region of Tanzania is you have a farm that is family owned, and you usually have the head of the household allocating subplots to his children. So when this owner maybe was tracing this farm, he was tracing and then thinking like, maybe this is like, I need to demarcate this for like the land that my son.
Okay.
No, then he kind of corrected it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That was really interesting.
You're very welcome.
Anil is asking about drone repairs and malfunctions. Do you have an in-house team to do that for you?
Great question. One after the other. So we have in-house repair only up to a certain point. Only up to a certain point for this particular platform. So to give you an example, actually, I actually want to show you the drone in question. Can you see this? Ruchi?
Yes.
Is this visible?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the baby herself. This is the EB Plus. Very reliable platform. This is a real workhorse right here. But you can see tape. You can see some tape down here. You can see tape along the ailerons. Yeah. Some tape here, some tape here. There's some tape here. This propeller can come off.
I have a question. Can I go on?
And
wait a minute.
This happens when you have a bad landing. The propeller will just fly off and you're probably never going to see it again. So, here's your sensor compartment. Here's your battery compartment. Again, sometimes you can have really rough landings. These areas get messed up. You have to do some serious cleaning. Sometimes bits and pieces break off. So you have to do these kind of what I would say minor repairs. And, just pray that that's all you're going to have to do when you're out in the field. Because if the motor, for example, gets messed up, you're done. The job stops right there. You're going to have to go back to, the office. And that's not going to help you either, because the only people who can repair this are the manufacturers who happen to be back in Switzerland. Okay. Other things similar to that kind of repair, there's a ground proximity sensor here. There are other components like this pitted tube. There's the RTK. If these parts get messed up, that's it. It's a done deal. You're not going to be acquiring any data, and it potentially creates issues with clients depending on when you promised that you would deliver the data, right? So these are all things to consider, and there's a lot of preventative things that we try to anticipate, but really the most important thing is to follow the SOPs. If you follow the SOPs, you stand a very, very good chance of not having any sort of major incident occurring, So, and then, part of the SOPs is obviously also following the maintenance requirements of such a drone. So for this particular drone, it's supposed to be serviced every 100 flights. So every 100 flights, this drone has to be shipped to Switzerland. If not Switzerland, it has to be shipped to the dealer who happens to be in South Africa. But we would prefer to ship it to Switzerland. Somehow that's easier. And when they do that routine service, they're going to give you a new motor. They're going to check everything that needs to be checked. And anything that needs to be changed within that 100 flight cycle gets changed. You get the drone back and life goes on. When you're out in the field, you've done your risk assessments, you're using good judgment, so situational awareness. You are practicing good airmanship, then you should be okay. You're not trying to do things under pressure just because the client maybe is trying to put you under pressure. No, you work within your comfort level. And when you do so, there's going to be really less chance of things, out of the ordinary occurring. We have been quite fortunate, I would say, but it's a kind of a calculated fortune because we follow the SOPs. So we've never had anything like catastrophic happening to us in the field where we had to cease operations. But we have to do a lot of minor repairs. You're going to get a lot of these things happening. Sometimes the wing itself will absolutely just smash, right? So you're going to have to take the wing. The wing is completely damaged. You're going to have to take it out because you were following the SOPs. You're following the procedures. Hopefully you were carrying some spare wings with you. You stick in that new spare wing and you continue doing the job. These are all things that you need to plan way in advance before you ever reach the field. Answer your question somehow, or?
Sure, of course. So there is another follow-up question to that is about redundancy. Do we have still additional redundancies that we use?
Oh, I see that from
Amit.
Is that Amit? Okay. Okay, so remember with this. Okay, so with this particular platform, you don't get a live feed like you would, let's say, with a DJI Phantom product or a DJI Mavic, or any of those similar type of platforms. You cannot get a live feed with the EB. So you'll get telemetry data. So I can see everything, but I don't get a live feed. And for very good reason. Because remember, I mentioned that sometimes you lose radio link. You lose radio link, you're not going to get that feed from 5, 6, 7 kilometers away. It was not designed like that. So this platform was intended to be flown beyond the visual line of sight. That's what it's for. So the live feed would be impractical.
Okay. So I guess the cost of the drone is about 25,000 US dollars, if I'm not wrong.
Back then, yes. It's cheaper now. Like the EBX now is which is the next one in the series. It's cheaper.
Okay, great. So if anybody has any other question that
Yeah.
you want to ask Leka, then you can unmute yourself. If any of your questions are still unanswered and you want to still ask, then you can unmute yourself or just say thanks to Leka. Okay, I guess I'll do the closing. So this has been an amazing session, Leka. Thank you so much. My respect and regards for you has gone up 1,000-folds. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for so generously sharing. And in the future, as soon as we ease the lockdown, we would come up with another course where when we do face-to-face courses, the way you said, we do workshops as well in India. I would really love to have you as one of our teachers here. And I did that in Nagaland when we called Patrick and we had called Darpan from Nepal. The next big workshop that we do in India, I'm definitely going to call you. Be ready for that. I mean, I'll book your dates in advance.
Anytime, Ruchi. I'm all yours.
Thank you so much. That's sweet. So thank you, everybody. Tomorrow we are going to be talking about wildlife drones in the morning, and we are going to be talking about we'll be kind of merging agriculture, disasters, and conservation in one lecture in the evening. And we'll be talking about droughts. So the drought survey would be done by an expert in the evening and wildlife drones in the morning. And I would see you all. And meanwhile, I'm still trying to figure out how to give you the next big assignment, which I want you to learn a bit of Pix4D and I want you to learn a bit of collaborative marking of the land boundaries. So just give me some more time to collect the sample data for you and do it. But we will be doing that tonight or tomorrow morning for sure. So be ready for that. And meanwhile, please complete the rest of your assignments. We'll be having the end of closing of the 3rd week and we'll be starting the last week tomorrow, the 4th week. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Leka, once again.
Yeah, so Ruchi, this participatory mapping issue, it has advanced, and there's an organization called It's for Land.
Okay.
That we're planning to partner with because they have a series of tools which are really, really cool that aid this exercise. So I don't know, is there going to be some way of
can you put that in the chat?
Perhaps the best way is
can you please put that in the chat?
The Twitter feed.
Sure. Can you put it in the chat, the name of the organization? I'll try and get in touch with them.
Sure. Let me make sure that we have the right spelling here. Okay. Word. There you go. I believe it's, if you do a Google search for that.
Okay.
It's for land. They are based in the Netherlands.
Okay. Interesting.
They have done some similar work in Tanzania.
Mm-hmm.
So they're developing actually these tools, and it would be really cool to share those with you at some point. I think with everybody. So I would say the best thing to communicate is perhaps through Twitter
Sure.
to just keep updated. So yeah, all these things, phase 3, when we get around to doing phase 3 or any other kind of land related project, or for that matter, anything else that we're doing, just join the Twitter, follow us on Twitter, and you can keep track of that. And I would absolutely look forward to doing this again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Leka. You are such a kind soul. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Anytime.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.